Hey guys, Jim here with another video for you. This is Shocktober Volume 21, My Horror Collection on Blu-ray Part 2, 1980 through 1982. But before I begin, at the end of this video, if you like what you see, please consider giving me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe. Most importantly, please leave comments below. Let me know how you feel about these films. Let me know if there's any films from these years that I should add to my collection. Now, as I mentioned on my previous video, I'm only including the horror movies that I have on Blu-ray. I am not including any DVDs, and I'm going through these movies in chronological order. The first installment was yesterday. That dealt with the movies that I have from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. We're starting off with the 80s now, but if I went with one video with the films from the 80s, we would be here for 3 hours. I just did a little inventory before I started doing this video, and by my count, I have just under 100 titles strictly from the 80s alone. So we're going to break this up into two videos. The first one, like I said, it's going to cover the years from 1980 through 1982. And about half of the movies that I have from the 80s are from those 3 years. So that's why we're going to split it up that way. So without further ado, we're just going to get into this. We're going to jam right through them. We're not going to go into plots. I might give a little bit about my thoughts of the movies, but like I said, we're not going to go into any kind of plots. This is not a ranking video of any kind. At the end of the month, I am going to do a top 25 from my collection. So like I said, without further ado, let's begin. We're going to start off with 1980. No particular order. These are not in alphabetical order or by genre. I just pulled them off the shelf. So, starting in 1980, we have a science fiction horror movie called Without Warning. This one's got Martin Landau and Jack Palance in it. Look at that goofy alien right there. It's just so goofy. Yeah, this movie, it's fun. It's really bad, but it's fun. And then we've got Alligator, directed by Louis Teague and starring Robert Forster and the great Henry Silva, among others. Absolutely love this B-movie, monster movie. I saw this theatrically. Absolutely love it. And then we've got, from the Corman Factory, Humanoids from the Deep. I absolutely love the artwork on this steelbook. And like I said, this is a B movie from the Corman Factory, very exploitive. This movie would not fly today. But again, it's one of those movies from my childhood. I absolutely love it in all of its skeezy glory. And then we've got another steelbook, Motel Hell. Takes all kinds of critters for Farmer Vincent's fritters. And again, horror comedy, basically. Rory Calhoun, Nancy Parsons. I couldn't remember her name the last time I brought this movie up. But again, a lot of fun. Then we've got a really scary ghost story called The Changeling. This one is starring George C. Scott in one of his best performances as far as I'm concerned. Melvin Douglas and Trish Vanderveer. This one is directed by Peter Medak. This is an old-fashioned ghost story. No blood, no gore. Absolutely terrifying. I love this movie. Then we've got a couple batshit crazy movies. The first one is The Island, based on the Peter Benchley novel, starring Michael Caine and the late, great David Warner. I love David Warner so much. He's awesome in everything. He's really over the top as the pirate in this movie, but yeah, this movie's a lot of fun. Speaking of pirates and ghosts, about pirate ghosts with John Carpenter's The Fog, starring Adrienne Barbeau, Tom Adkins, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Hal Holbrook, among others. Classic. We got a psychological horror film for you. This one is Fade to Black, starring Dennis Christopher and Tim Thomerson, and a very young Mickey Rourke makes an appearance in this movie. Like I said, this is a psychological thriller. It's one of those movies I watched on cable all the time when I was a kid. Really, really enjoy it. And we've got another psychological thriller for you. This one is Windows, starring Talia Shire and Elizabeth Ashley, among others. This is a, let's face it, it's an exploitation movie. It's a lesbian stalker, you know. Not a very good movie. I mean, it's well made, good performances, but the movie itself, it's pretty weak. And then we're going to go into some slashers for you. First, we've got Terror Train, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Ben Johnson, and David Copperfield. This one is directed by Roger Spottiswoode, who really directed a lot of great movies. Shoot to Kill comes to mind immediately from Roger Spottiswoode. Yeah, good journeyman director. This movie's okay. Then we've got He Knows You're Alone, which is a stalker who stalks brides-to-be. There's young Tom Hanks right there. He made his big screen debut in this film. Very small part. Not a very gory movie. It's more of a suspense thriller. And again, it's decent. It's nothing to write home about. And then we've got Prom Night, another slasher with Jamie Lee Curtis, co-starring Leslie Nielsen. This is Saturday Night Fever, the horror film, because again, there is more disco dancing in this movie than Saturday Night Fever. I do not like this movie. I loved it when I was a kid. It is boring as hell. And another great slasher that started off the franchise, Friday the 13th, directed by Sean Cunningham and starring Kevin Bacon and Betsy Palmer, among others. Again, this was the beginning of the franchise, and it's one of the best in the franchise. It's just a great movie. Excellent special effects work by Tom Savini. And of course, we've got Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers, directed by, of course, Stanley Kubrick. This is based on the Stephen King novel, of course, much different, very different than the book. It's one of the reasons why Stephen King has never liked this movie. It's a classic. I always separate the two. I prefer the book to the movie, but again, I do really enjoy The Shining. How can you not? And our last film from 1980, it's a good one. Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill. This is like his American Giallo. Stars Michael Caine in a great performance, co-starring Angie Dickinson, Nancy Allen, and Keith Gordon. One of my absolute favorite De Palma movies. It's just a great movie. That is it for 1980. Now we're going to move along to 1981. And again, no rhyme or reason, just jamming through these. The first on the list, we got a couple of sequels for you. First we have, and there goes my movies, Halloween 2. This one is directed by Rick Rosenthal, and it stars Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance reprising their roles from the original. This movie takes place exactly where the first one ends, and I think it's the best Halloween sequel of them all. Outside of the original, this one's my favorite. Speaking of sequels, we have the second installment of Friday the 13th, starring Amy Steele, who I think is one of the best final girls in the franchise. And again, this is one of the best sequels in the franchise. If not, outside of Final Chapter, I think this is the best sequel. And again, this is the one where Jason's running around with a bag on his head. But there's some great kills in this movie, especially the poor bastard in the wheelchair. It's such an iconic moment from this movie. Continuing the slashers, we've got probably the best Canadian slasher of them all. And it's My Bloody Valentine. Here's my Scream Factory steelbook. Again, I love the artwork on these steelbooks from Scream Factory. They're so good. This is a great movie. It really is. It's been remade a couple of times in 3D, actually, which I also enjoyed. But this movie, like I said, out of the slashers from that era, it's definitely one of the best. And then we've got Happy birthday to me. This is like an American Giallo as well. This one is directed by J. Lee Thompson, and it stars Glenn Ford, Melissa Sue Anderson, among others. The hook on this movie is every murder is some bizarre way. Like right here is the shish kebab murder. There's a motorcycle murder, a bench press murder, a couple of them. Fun movie. Not top tier horror. It's fun. Then we've got Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. This one I saw at the theater with my sister. And again, it's not my favorite Tobe Hooper movie, but it's pretty damn good. Then we've got Hell Night, starring Linda Blair and what's his face? Peter Barton, who was in Final Chapter. Again, very slow movie. It's a well-made movie. It's pretty damn slow. Then we've got Eyes of a Stranger. This is another one of those skeevy stalker movies. The guy's a rapist. Starring Lauren Tews, who was on The Love Boat at the time. And making her big screen debut is Jennifer Jason Leigh. Jennifer Jason Leigh is the best thing about this movie. Again, definitely not one of my favorites, but it is a well-made movie. And then we've got Dominos Christos. Sorry, Roy. We got The Final Conflict, or Omen Part 3, starring Sam Neill as the adult Damien. It's the weakest of the trilogy, but I still enjoy it. There's some pretty hardcore stuff in this movie. The whole plot line of people killing babies, it's pretty gnarly. Even 40 years later, it's pretty gnarly. But again, the main reason why this movie is decent is because of Sam Neill. He's great, as always. Then we've got one of my favorite movies from the year, and it's really under the radar, but it's a great movie. It's called Dead and Buried. It's directed by Gary Sherman and written by Dan O'Bannon and Gary Shusett, who wrote the original Alien. This is a crazy movie. It's got James Franciscus, Jack Albertson, and Robert Englund in a small part. Really creepy movie, really good. Check this one out if you've never seen it. And then we've got Ghost Story, based on the best-selling novel by Peter Straub, and starring a legendary cast consisting of Fred Astaire, Melvin Douglas, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and John Houseman, among others. Alice Krige is the highlight of this movie. She's fantastic in this movie. I really enjoy Ghost Story. It's a slow burn, very good movie. Then we've got an Alien ripoff here, and yeah, I did not include Alien on the 70s movies because, again, to me, at its heart, it's a science fiction movie. This is an Alien ripoff called Galaxy of Terror. Absolutely terrible movie. Great art on the steelbook. And then we've got my introduction to David Cronenberg with Scanners. My sister Sharon took me to see this. We didn't know anything about it, and oh my God, our minds were blown. Michael Ironside is fantastic as Daryl Revick in this movie. Scanners, what can be said? It's just an all-timer. And then in 1981, like I mentioned in the years of film, that was kind of the year of the werewolf. We're going to start off with Wolfen, which is not a werewolf movie, as I've stated multiple times. This one stars Albert Finney and the late, great Gregory Hines. Also has Edward James Olmos and Diane Venora, among others. Excellent movie. It really is. This is a slow burn thriller. I don't know if I would call it a horror movie. It's definitely a thriller, but yeah, excellent movie. And then we've got Joe Dante's classic, The Howling. This is my Scream Factory steelbook, as you can see. And again, one of my all-time favorite werewolf movies, one of my favorite Joe Dante movies. The last time that I mentioned this movie, I misspoke. I mentioned Dee Wallace, and I mentioned her late husband. I identified him as Christopher. His name was Christopher Stone, and he was a very good actor. And again, The two of them obviously have chemistry. They were married at the time. Excellent movie. Has a very dark sense of humor to it. And the final film from 81 is quite possibly the greatest werewolf movie of all time. John Landis's An American Werewolf in London, starring David Naughton, Griffin Dunne, and the beautiful Jenny Agutter, who I've been in love with more or less my entire life. This movie created the special effects makeup Oscar. That Oscar did not exist before this movie. It came out as a special achievement Oscar, and it has been an actual Oscar ever since. The transformation scene will never be broken. There is one more movie from 1981 that I didn't grab for some reason. I just realized it, and that is The Burning. I will include that on the next video. Okay, now we're going to 1982. Let's get this wrapped up. We're already at 15 minutes plus. Another Alien ripoff. We're going to start off with Forbidden World. And again, horrible movie. Fantastic steelbook. I mean, that steelbook's great. Alien ripoff. It's a piece of crap. Then we've got They're Here. Poltergeist. Directed by Tobe Hooper, although some people think that it was directed by Steven Spielberg. Starring JoBeth Williams, Craig T. Wilson, Beatrice Straight, Zelda Rubinstein, and the late Heather O'Rourke and Dominique Dunne. It's tragic what happened to those two actresses. Dominique Dunne was killed by her crazy boyfriend soon after principal photography ended on this movie. And little Heather O'Rourke, of course, passed away after the filming of the third movie. Very sad. But Poltergeist, it's a classic. It's one of the best horror movies of the 80s, period. It's just an all-time classic. This is not an all-time classic. From this double feature, The House Where Evil Dwells. Starring Edward Albert and Susan George and Doug McClure. This one is people fighting ninja ghosts, or samurai ghosts, with a little bit of boobage thrown in. Again, this was one of those movies I watched a lot on cable as a kid, and it was better than I thought it was. And then I bought this and realized, no, it's not better than I thought it was. But compared to this piece of shit, this movie is like Casablanca. I mean, Ghost Warrior is horrible. Okay, then we've got Alone in the Dark, with a great cast of Jack Palance, Martin Landau, Donald Pleasance, among others. This one's directed by Jack Shoulder. His movie's a lot of fun. It's goofy. It's a lot of fun. And then from this double feature, we have Visiting Hours. This one stars Michael Ironside from Scanners, of course, Lee Grant, and William Shatner, among others. And this one is about a guy who stalks a TV reporter in a hospital. He tries to kill her. She escapes wounded, goes to the hospital. He poses as an orderly to finish the job. Typical slasher. And then we've got Slumber Party Massacre. Another steelbook from Scream Factory. Another movie from the Corman Factory. A lot of fun. This movie's actually kind of feminist, if you can get past all the boobs. But yeah, this movie's a lot of fun. It's a lot smarter than it has any right to be. And then we're going to start with a couple of sequels. We're going to go with Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. This is the one where Jason finally gets his mask. And like I mentioned on the 50 Years of Film, when I saw this one theatrically in 3D, it was outstanding. It was really awesome. It's just when you watch this movie not in 3D, it's irritating. I hate every character in this movie. Every one of them. So, yeah. Friday the 13th 3, it's beloved among fans of the franchise. It's not my favorite. Not even close. And then we've got Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. 8 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. I'm sorry. Starring Tom Atkins, Stacey Nelkin, and the great Dan O'Hurley as the bad guy in this movie. He's from RoboCop. This movie was a huge flop at the time, lots of backlash. People freaked out because it was Halloween 3. They were expecting Michael Myers, and of course, this has got nothing to do with Michael Myers. And I've always been of the opinion that if this movie was released simply as Season of the Witch, it would have been a nice little hit instead of the flop that it was. But it has definitely gotten a cult status since. I really enjoy this movie. And then we got some creature movies for you. The first one, The Beast Within, starring Ronnie Cox, among others. This one is about the guy who turns into a cicada on his 18th birthday. And this movie sucks. The transformation scene is great. It really is. It still holds up. But the rest of the movie is ridiculous. And the final product is really ridiculous. But like I said, the transformation scene is really a lot of fun. Then we got one of the most bizarre movies from that year, Cat People, starring Natasha Kinski, Malcolm McDowell, Annette O'Toole, and John Hurd, among others. This is a remake of a movie from the 50s, although it might have even been the 40s, I'm not really sure. Although it really has nothing to do with those. This is an erotic thriller. I mean, that's really all it is. And Malcolm McDowell is very creepy in this movie. We saved probably the best two for last. The first, George A. Romero and Stephen King's Creepshow. This is my Shout Factory special edition. I love this version. I really do. This is probably my favorite anthology movie of all time. It's got a great cast. Hal Holbrook, Adrienne Barbeau, Leslie Nielsen, E.G. Marshall. Stephen King himself shows up in this. Absolutely love this movie. I will always say that Tales from the Crypt TV show would not exist without Creepshow. This movie is just fantastic. It gets better every time I watch it. It's just so much fun. We're ending 1982 with a bang. John Carpenter's The Thing. My favorite horror movie of all time, and it's not even close. Starring Kurt Russell, Keith David, Wilford Brimley, Richard Dysart, and T.K. Carter, among others. The entire cast is phenomenal in this movie. And up until Exorcist 3 came along with the nurse, this movie still has the best jump scare in movie history, in my opinion. The blood test. That's all you need to say. The blood test. Absolute perfect movie about paranoia. And like I said, it's my favorite horror movie ever. And that is how we are going to end this edition of Shocktober. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe. Most importantly, leave comments below. Please let me know how you feel about these films. Let me know about any films from this era that I should definitely add to my collection. We are going to do another one tomorrow, which will cover the rest of the 80s. And then we will continue from that point. But anyways, like I said, I hope everybody's having a great weekend, and we'll catch you on the next one.